evening and welcome to Face for the Newsfirst team. I'm Niresh Eliathambi. Sri Lanka is such a diverse, multicultural nation, isn't it? But there are communities in this country which are barely looked at, barely remembered, and one such community is our estate community, or the Malayagar community as it's formally known. What's going on with it? It's one of those communities which is so neglected, you hardly hear of it until some election comes along. But we have with us a gentleman who champions the cause of this community, none other than Professor Vijaya Kumar, who is a very interesting person indeed. He has been on our program several times. He is the president of the Lanka Estate Workers Union. He's also a member of the executive committee of the NPP. So he's not a member of parliament. He did not stand for election. He said younger people should be standing for election, but he is very much an active member of the NPP. He is an emeritus professor of the University of Peradeniya, where he was the dean of the science faculty, and of course he is a chemist by qualification. Welcome, Professor. Lovely to have you on our programs again.
Thank you, Niresh, and thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to talk a few words about the problems of the Malayagar Tamils.
Right. So, Professor, now this is very interesting because you are a member of the NPP, well-known member. You're on the executive committee, and you have been championing the cause of this estate community for many years, for decades, in fact. And you're the president of one of the key unions of the estates. Now, one would think that it would be easier for you to effect change because you are, after all, a member of the ruling party. But it doesn't quite work that way, does it? Because the party has, as the government, has so much on its plate. But at the same time, you want to ensure that this estate community is not forgotten and is brought into the limelight.
Yes, the NPP made a commitment about 2 years ago, I think October 2023 in Hatton. We made what was called a Hatton Declaration, where we had developed a policy, something that can be done practically to solve the major problems faced by not only the estate workers, the Malayagar Tamil community as a whole. You know, this community since 1947, they have not been treated as citizens of this country, equal citizens. Before 1940, within the first half of that century, the population was 14% of Sri Lanka was Malayagar Tamil. But now it's come down to 4.2%. And of this, the people who are worst off are the estate workers. Now, others, but even the other people have suffered because they had no representation in parliament for maybe 30 years, no proper representation. They got voting rights only after about 1985, 92, that period. Actually, a few people had voting rights, like for me. So I'm neither Malayagar nor Tamil, right? But my parents came from India, a place called Kerala, and settled down in Sri Lanka, and we could get citizenship very easily. The estate workers, they were probably Sri Lanka's first gig workers. You know what gig workers are?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so they were first gig workers. They were not properly employed by the estate. They were head kanganis who used to employ them and supply labor to the estates and the money is paid to the head kangani, who pays it to them after deducting whatever loans they had taken from him. So these people were the first gig workers, they wouldn't have any documents. All the documents are in the Kangani's pocket, and that all the Kanganis would have tips of paper. So how could they prove that they were in Sri Lanka for the last 25 years? None of them could prove it. So the estate workers could never get citizenship as easily as people like us could get it. And most of them did not get citizenship because it's very difficult. Even now, if they want to get some EPF, they have to go to several estates and find where they worked, and things are getting a little better, but it was much worse those days. So until they got a vote, the MPs did not care for them. For instance, Mr. Premadasa built, he says 1 million houses, but I think it's somewhere about 2 lakhs of houses. Those houses, not one was built in the estates. But the estates are the place where people had absolutely no houses, proper house at all. You know that there are line rooms that for 150 years ago they were built. About 40% of them are still living in, not 40, about 60% of them are still living in line rooms, and no attempt has been made. Now, although in the recent past attempt has been made, but the process is so slow, and there are still many of them are living in the line rooms, and even if the present government, even if they want to do it, this is not a thing that you can do overnight. You have to keep building, and it take maybe 30-40 years to build it. So what they should do now, at least, I think, is to provide them with a piece of land so that they are in a position to build their own house at least.
Professor, now this issue of land for the estate community has come up before, and it is used as a political weapon as well. We've seen this where various MPs from various parties come and promise this and say, we're going to get you, we'll get the necessary legislation through Parliament, and we'll get 10 perches for each person and all that. But in the end, it just doesn't happen. It gets forgotten. But what's the solution? Now that the NPP is in office, surely this can be done.
Yeah, the real problem is not with the government. Now, in order to give that 10 perches, you have to get the permission of the companies that are managing the place, and they are not prepared to give any land except in some godforsaken part of the estate. So that is the main problem. Then having got that, there are also a lot of approvals that have to be given before that can be given. But the government is committed to giving each estate worker 10 perches. But I am sure that at least maybe 20% of them will get it before the 4-5 year period is over.
But Professor, surely the government of the day has enough influence over the estate management companies, which are after all contracted by the government, to get this sorted out.
No, but according to the agreements, the government cannot interfere in these things. There are only government has got one golden vote, but that can only be used for certain specific things, right? That is, if they can't take land, there's a big process if they want to get the land. But I think you have to have a revolutionary solution, not a normal solution will not work.
But Professor, in Sri Lanka, when the government wants to do something, it jolly well does it. We have had this for decades and decades, where governments, I'm not in favor of strong arm tactics, but there are ways and means legally to get things done. It might take a little time, but it's all about the political will to do it.
Yeah, the political will in the old days was lubricated with some financial gain to the people, but now that doesn't happen. But still, there is the political will is there. So, as you say, there may be a method to do it, but it's still they have not been able to. This happening slowly, but not fast enough.
But slowly isn't good enough.
Yeah, I know that.
Because the estate community last year it celebrated 200 years. And with much fanfare. But in the end, what's the point of fanfare and commemorating 200 years if the conditions of the estate community are not uplifted rapidly?
Yeah, it should not be a celebration. It should have been something else 200 years of drudgery. That's how it should have been called. But anyway, let's hope that something happens. I mean, 6 months is still too short a time, but I'm sure the government will do something for them. We have given up, there's a plan in the Hatton Declaration, and already the government about salaries. Government has mentioned that in the budget 1,700, but so far money has not come. It's not being paid. I think the government has to now use strong arm tactics to get that 1,700 paid. Because legally, they have to pay the 1,700.
Yes, it's 1,350 plus.
No. What it's under the wages board. In the old days, these were negotiated under a collective agreement. In a collective agreement, you can have anything you want put into it. But wages board comes under the wages board ordinance. According to the wages board ordinance, what is specified is a minimum wage. So minimum wage specified is 1,700. Whether they put additionally 350, all that, every person working in the rubber and tea trades should get 1,700, and this is legally enforceable. In 1931, there was a British plant at Perth Estate, Kalutara, who tried to reduce the working hours to 6 hours and pay 3/4 the wage. But the Supreme Court at that time gave a verdict that you can't do this. It's a minimum wage, you have to pay the thing. The only reason you can stop paying that thing is if the worker, having been given work, refuses to work. Then you can cut, otherwise you can't. So that is legally it is there, but nobody is taking action against it. I would have taken action, but I don't have the money to, because you can't fight the companies unless you're going to the highest courts, and it's a very expensive process. So, but the thing is, definitely, if anyone takes this up, the companies have to pay with arrears, because they are breaking the law by not paying 1,700. That is the situation. So I hope we will be able to do it. But I am told by the government has said that they will make sure that they pay 1,700.
Now, apart from the land issue and the salary issue, there are many other issues as well.
Yes, of course. Yes. Education is one, health is the other. And then there are other issues. For example, if you look at an estate worker today having to deal with the government, unfortunately, the number of Pradesh Sabha in the estates, right now, the district secretaries, officers are scattered too far away. They are not as close as in the rest of the community, rest of the Sri Lanka. So if they want to go there, and they have to take a day off, but they go there and then they find there is hardly anyone who can speak Tamil there. That's another problem. So the part of our Hatton Declaration was that to increase the number of people who can communicate in Tamil, and to increase the number of offices to which the people in the Malaya Tamil community can have access to when dealing with the government.
Now, Professor, this excuse of no officials who speak Tamil, this is rather ridiculous.
I know.
In this day and age, and I've heard this stupid excuse, and I call it a stupid excuse, for throughout my lifetime. You see this. You see it in the courts. There aren't enough interpreters. You see the police saying, well, we couldn't take the statement because we don't have police officers who are conversant in Tamil. But what's the answer here? I mean, clearly, if it's a national language and a working language of the people. So you need to have officials who speak that language. And shouldn't there be even a quota system, brought in to ensure that the key government departments do have enough officials who can speak Tamil?
There should be a system like that, but the problem is that we don't have enough people who are prepared to accept it also. If you look at it, for one thing, many of the northern Tamil educated people have left the country, right? And in the south, that is the Malaya community, they did not have good education opportunities until a few years ago. And even now it's not still good, but still it is somewhat better. I'm sure that in the next 10 years there will be even less. There will be enough people who can apply and get these jobs from the Malaya community, provided the government is prepared to give them the jobs. And I think this government will definitely do that. Because usually the problem is that the governments give jobs to their supporters, right? And you if you take in the south, most of the supporters, and the Malaya people had no vote also. Most of the supporters were Sinhalese, so they were given jobs there. That's how it has happened. Historically, that is the reason why it is that. But then they could have been asked to train to be able to use Tamil. That even has not happened. And you find what happens now. For example, when S.B. Dissanayake was Minister of Higher Education, Peradeniya got a whole lot of people from Hangurang Katha to come to work there, right? So it's like that. So if the MP, if the minister in charge, the MPs are not from that area, they will get people from their community somewhere and put them there. That is the worst problem.
But I would think
it's not a good excuse.
Yeah,
but you have to do some sort of positive discrimination in order to get that going.
Absolutely. Yeah. And government training programs across the board are woefully inadequate. So trying to train Sri Lankans in their own language, it's rather silly, and it's not going to happen. It simply hasn't happened. I've heard this from so many governments saying we're going to train Sinhala speaking Sinhala officials to speak Tamil, and it doesn't happen. Just
there's a start at a young age.
Yeah. So why not simply hire Tamil speaking officials in the first place?
Yeah, but at the moment they are not hiring people.
But they're hiring for key positions. I think the government announced that 30,000 jobs are going to be.
So when they do that, they will do this. I'm sure.
Well, certainly. Yeah. You don't need 30,000 Tamil speaking officials. I mean, if you had even 5,000, that's certainly enough.
Even 500 will be a good amount.
Exactly. I mean, one for each police station, one or two for each divisional secretariat, and so on. That would be a start. Because until that happens, like you said, for a Tamil person, Malayagan of North and East, wherever, to walk into a divisional secretariat or a district secretariat and not be served is quite silly.
Yeah, of course.
That's on that side. But what about the health issue that you brought up?
Yeah, in 1992, when these estates was handed over private management, there was a efficient health system running in the estates. There used to be some run by not by doctors, what are called estate. Were really pharmacists who were given some sort of EPAs, I think they were called. So they were in charge of that estate, and there was a dispensary and also a ward with about 2-3 beds, so that any deliveries could be done. And these EPA people were really, there was some sort of provision. So now with the government has increased the number of hospitals, and it's fairly well spread. So therefore, with most of the estates have allowed this to neglect and disuse. A few of estates, of course, still continue to have this type of thing, but there is a problem in that if you look at estate roads, they are not maintained. Estate, as someone said the other day, the only road in the estate that is maintained is the road to the superintendent's house. All the other roads are not maintained. So these doctors and people who they have to come also, it's going to be very difficult because their vehicles cannot travel on these roads. So there should be some other method of transporting. So I think maybe that we could, first of all, we must try to get these people, the companies, to re-establish the dispensaries and the wards. If there are workers who have to travel more than 3 kilometers to the nearest hospital. Then they should have some facility. And in order to make sure doctors can go there, I would suggest something like what is this scheme that they use for emergency ambulance?
Right.
Suicide rate,
yes.
So it's like suicide rate. There should be one dedicated to the estates, so that not only it serves at two purposes: one, to bring the people who are emergency cases here, but also to take the doctor into the estates, because I don't think the estate management is going to improve the roads.
Then what about education?
Education, of course, there has been some improvement. The government has taken over estate schools, but now most estate schools, to a large extent, they are up to the primary level. There is fair amount of education, but the problem they are having is they not having good teachers, because nobody wants to teach in the estate schools, and there are not enough people from the Malayalam community who are qualified enough to be teachers here. What usually happens is people get appointments as teachers in the schools, and then ever they are trying to get a transfer out. Now they recently introduced some 5 years compulsory service, but the thing is, even when they are doing this, they are trying to get out and try to go back to their hometown, trying to go back to towns where they can do tuition. These are all things that they can't do in the estate schools. So, but there are few estate schools in the estate towns that have developed, and therefore we are getting a fair amount of students going in for higher education. Of course, they have to qualify they have to get through their O levels and A levels, which is difficult given the estate education system. But we are getting some people, and there are can count them by numbers of fingers in your hand. But there are doctors, engineers, but not very many of them from the Malayalam community.
Right. So what's the solution here?
Solution is there is a solution coming up, and that is they are trying to improve all the schools in Sri Lanka at the primary level. This is the other problem. If you don't have to take the Malayalam community. Now, why is it that all the people want to put their children into national schools and are prepared to pay big bribes to put their children there? The main reason is that the other schools are not of proper standard. So what you have to do is in all the village schools, all the schools that are at the primary level, they should be brought up to the same standard. Now, this is if you go abroad, nobody wants to go to any school except the school nearest to their home, because all the schools are the same standard. They have the same syllabus, and they have the same facilities. If we can do that here, of course that's a very expensive business, but if we can do that here, half the problem will be solved. Then because once you get the primary education, from there the people who are good, people who can do well, can go in for other schools and improve their education, and end up in universities and ultimately succeed in life.
Interesting thoughts indeed, but I want to ask you to elaborate on this tuition issue. But first, we need to take a short commercial break. We'll be right back with Professor Vijaya Kumar. Don't go away. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
ඔබේ ගමේ නගරේ දේශපාලනයේ හෙට දවස සතිය දිනවල සවස 6:00ට
ඔන්න මෙදා සැරෙත් අවුරුද්දට අපි එනවා
කන්තලේ මධ්‍ය මහාවිද්‍යාලීය ක්‍රීඩාංගණයට
අප්‍රේල් 19 දවස පුරා
අවුරුදු සිරියෙන් පුරවන්න ඔයාලත් එන්න.
අවුරුදු කුමරා කුමරිය බයිසිකල් ධාවන තරගය
ඔරුපැදීමේ තරගය සහ ජන ක්‍රීඩා රසක් සමග
කුරුණෑගල බැජී සංගීතයට ජනප්‍රිය ගායක ගායිකාවන් ගී ගයන
නැගෙනහිරට අවුරුදු
අප්‍රේල් 19 වනදා දවස පුරා
කන්තලේ මැදි විදුහල ක්‍රීඩාංගණයේදී.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I am in conversation with Professor Vijaya Kumar, President of the Lanka Estate Workers Union and a member of the Executive Committee of the NPP. Now, Professor, let me digress a little bit from the problems purely of the estate community and talk to you about the issue of private tuition, which has ruined education in Sri Lanka because teachers, by and large now, they don't have a lot of interest in their own students. Instead, they have these large tuition classes, not all of them, of course, there are many fine teachers, but you see this, I mean, there are many towns in Sri Lanka which are known as tuition towns. I mean, Gampaha, which is the second largest city in Sri Lanka, is known as a tuition town. Anuradhapura, Kurunegala, these are tuition towns, you know, and on a Saturday, you see thousands of children and teenagers, you know, just filing out of these big halls. So that's where the teachers want to teach. So they don't want to be in village schools and not in the estate community schools. How do you take care of this? I mean, is there any method by which perhaps new teachers, once they are appointed, should be, you know, it should be made mandatory for them to serve perhaps 5 years in a village school or a estate school?
Yes, so that's happening in the medical system. You can't just go straight away to the main town. You have to first go and serve in a small hospital, then a town hospital, and then finally only you can come as a specialist. For example, you at the last few years that you come to Kandy or Colombo. So like that we can make a system like that, but we must also provide them with quarters, for example, provide some incentives to live in the village area, maybe pay hardship allowance, something like that, some system which would make it worthwhile for them to stay. You know, there are dedicated teachers who would like to stay, but it's probably difficult for them to stay there because first of all, the other thing is that the schools are not good. What about their children's education? So they try to move to the town so that they can send them to better schools in the town. So we have to provide incentives, makes the schools much better, provide incentives. It's a lot, but it's a lot of money, and also then you know, you can get rid of to some extent the tuition system by constructing your questions in these exams in such a way that they make the student think. If you have questions where they can memorize an answer, right, then it's very easy for tuition masters. But there was a time, for short time, when one of my colleagues was the controlling chief, where in the chemistry this thing, it became all on principles. So he was very unpopular with the tuition master. But you can set papers. Now, for instance, I think if you take the advanced level papers, London and all, they are set in that manner. So where you have to think out. It's not everything, if you just because you memorize, you answer all the questions. So if we take some time to ensure that the question paper is set in a way that it's anti-tuition, I think we might proceed somewhere, but those are all very difficult, not very easy solutions.
Well, system change is what the NPP was brought in to do, elected to do. So these are the systems which need to change.
Well, but for the system change, the media is an important factor. Right now, for instance, the media has a role to play. You have to put pressure on the politicians to make sure something happens. For instance, if you take the case when in 1970s, they were trying to nationalize the estates. There was a big resistance from the British owners, and it was almost failing. But then what happened was, the media here, the British media, started showing pictures of the line rooms. And this is the type of place where the workers who earn money for the tea estates live. And with that, the whole thing changed. The British government also decided that we'll pay the compensation to these people because we don't want to get such bad publicity. So media has a role. Unfortunately, our media takes the easy way out, and as far as the Malayalam community is concerned, the Sinhala press is very anti Malayalam Tamil, or maybe anti Tamil. I don't know what it is, and the reason for this is because ultimately the politicians are behind it, and also you must remember that the rich families, I mean, they have to find someone to make sure that the poor Sinhalese people find a scapegoats in order to put their problems at ease. For example, if you take Swabhasha period, right, that they thought is a solution, but ultimately they found that they are not a solution. By moving to Sinhala, you could get a few jobs, but that didn't solve the problems of the Sinhalese people. Then they started thinking that the minorities were responsible for this. Muslims, Tamils, Malayalam Tamils, all these, and unfortunately the media feeds into this.
Well, it's divisive politics, isn't it,
Yeah.
which brings this about. It's easy to talk about the role of the media, but when you look at the four pillars of governance, you have the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, and then you have the media, and religion is also perhaps there. So the five pillars. In fact, I interviewed one of our award-winning journalists this morning, and we were discussing just this, that over the last 20 years or so, the other four pillars absolutely crumbled, and it was the media which actually kept democracy alive, because the executive became too powerful. The legislature was completely under the thumb of the president, and then the judiciary was cowed down by the executive. Religious leaders, goodness knows what happened to them, and you saw the result. And then finally, after the country crashed, it was a question of, we in the media told you so and you weren't listening. So
you two had a difficult time.
Absolutely. And
there are people stoning you as well. You've not said setting fire.
Yeah. It's astonishing in this day and age that anyone.
But I think media has to make sure that the promises are.
Absolutely. Which is why we bring politicians of all hues to shows like this one and ask the right questions. Doesn't matter if they're in the opposition or the ruling party or somewhere in between. We always keep the pressure on them. But when it comes to this, questions like this, the Malayalam community, the estates, there's a lot to be done. I certainly agree that yes, we need to focus much more on it. The problem is, of course, that the country has so many other man-made problems, the bankruptcy and so on, and then it's difficult to focus a lot of time on it. But apart from time, the other resources of the state, for example, money. Now, the government being bankrupt, where's the money to uplift the estate community? Is there enough money? Is it something which is now being pushed to the side, or is the estate community still very much in focus?
It's in focus. Of course, if there is not enough money, we can't expect to get all what we hope for. But at least they are taking some positive steps, and I'm sure that some part of what we thought can be done would be done. And in the future, when our situation improves, we hope that we will be able to completely solve the problem of the Malayalam Tamil community. Actually, we should, through education now, many of them are leaving the estates. from the estate areas, people are, if you go to a supermarket, you will find mostly Malayalam Tamil people serving in supermarkets. And people have come to at least some level of education.
I mean, it's a good thing if their options are widened.
Yeah, provided they also have places to stay. Here they come and they are in dormitories and things, so they prefer actually if they get a job in the estates. The estates. And the thing is that these people are not, the estate companies are not registering workers. They are trying to introduce a gig system into the estates. This is what they call outgrowers. Is a gig system where they are independent contractors providing tea to the management. Now that is very sad. So they don't want to. They are not helping in developing the community, because they should really take in some of these people, have them as workers, pay them a decent salary, then they have homes there. All be a good community. Maybe we can have then some sort of village type of concept, not the concept that Ranil mentioned, but a real village where we have of estate workers in each area.
But Professor, now we are a country where we have national policies for everything, which all gather dust on the shelves in ministries. But why don't we have a national policy for how an estate community could function, and the different models? I mean, not all estates are the same. So and
there is a thing called Niveda, which is some sort of estate. Some method of making the estate areas more governed better, but this is not
again the Niveda program. I mean, I've heard of it, I've discussed it on programs, but
nothing
it seems
happening.
to be non-existent. Is it actually happening?
There is nothing happening still, but I think that's one way with this government can do something.
Well, this government certainly has its work cut out for it in all these areas. Now, you spoke about the Hatton Declaration. Could you elaborate on that? What does that entail? It was 2 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah, 2 years ago, Hatton Declaration, where we analyzed the problems of the estates. With the problem I mentioned just now: education, health, salaries, and the formation of solving the problem of governance. All that was mentioned there actually, and I can send you a copy of it if you want.
That would be lovely.
Yeah, I will do that. Yeah, it's a fairly thorough thing, and we were not sure whether land will be available. So land, we said there must be some method of giving land. We couldn't at that time. We could. Now they have decided, I think, to give 10 purchase. At that time, 10 purchase was a lot, right? There was a lot of resistance to that, but I think people will be getting 10 purchase soon.
Now, who are the parties to the Hatton Declaration?
No, it's on the NPP talking to the Malayalam Tamil community. So we had a meeting, presented it, and it was signed by our president, and all of us signed it. People who were involved in preparing it, and it was accepted by the NPP, and it is theoretically the policy of the government with dealing with those problems, and then I think we can make some headway there.
Well, excellent. We look forward to that being actually implemented and not gathering dust on a shelf in some ministry.
Of course, there are some residual effects of the previous governments which are difficult, which are creating problems for this,
Well, that's to be expected, I think, in all ministries and departments and so on, but that's the system change that we require. Now, let me ask you the land and housing issue. Now, we spoke about the land issue, the 10 purchase and so on, but housing. Now, there was an Indian housing scheme sponsored by the government of India. That was fairly successful, but many more houses are needed.
Yeah, much more.
Right.
But there was also some houses built by the trust, PHDT, that is a Human Development Trust plantation. So though that was going very slow. but the Indian government coming, they increased, and but also the previous one, Indian government is now insisting that you give the deeds to the when you give the houses. But we realize that you can't produce so many estates, so many houses in such a short time. So we are thinking first, if we at least satisfy the people by giving them land, and some of them may be able to find some money and put up some quarters, at least any type of quarter is better than the line rooms.
Right. Now, may I put it to you that the Sri Lanka Army has been involved in building houses in disaster-prone areas, and quite fine, sturdy houses, and they built them quite quickly because they are, after all, a disciplined set of people. They're supposed to be. So, and they have the engineers as well. So perhaps the army could be used to speed up the construction.
I would have preferred if you take some estate Malayalam Tamil youth, train them in these things, take them into the army if you want, and put them on the job. Because the other thing, through this, you can develop, train them for employment.
Yes,
of course. We don't want to train army people in building houses. We want to make sure that then they can find employment in the community.
A good point. Yeah. A good point. So hopefully these would be implemented.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'll be pushing your party on these issues.
And you will be, as media, you will be pushing the party as
absolutely. Well. You're always welcome here, as you know. Although you live in Kandy, and we're very happy when you come down to Colombo, and we can grab you for one of our programs. Okay, let's digress from the estate community to the wider national issues. Yeah. 6 months have gone since the president was elected. Of course, we've the first 3 months we had the second election came up, and then getting the cabinet in place and getting officials in place and so on. But now, is the party comfortable in office now? Because there was always this point of, well, the new MPs are new, ministers are new, they need to study the system, and there's a lot of officialdom which has to be, you have to navigate through. But by and large, is it now generally set? Can we expect the accelerator, the foot on the accelerator now?
Yeah, well, the problem is the money, we are bankrupt. That is a problem. That's a problem. Of course, they are trying their best. I'm sure that that something will come out of it. There is so far no allegations of bribery and corruption.
Yeah, of course not.
Yeah, that itself is a big saving of money. And then of course the role of implementing is that of the government servants.
The bureaucracy.
Yes. It's the job of the ministers to give policy. So this story about having no experience is not true, because if the government gives a good policy, and if the government servants, if the politicians spell out a good policy, and if the government servants are honest and carry out that policy, then there should be no problem. That the honest and carry out part is is a problem.
I mean, we're laughing, but that is the major problem in this country, where government servants did not speak up when politicians were running rampant and doing whatever they wanted. And now, and government servants, by and large, got used to just sitting around and waiting for politicians to issue instructions, and the government servants
do it even if it's against the law.
Exactly. So, and now we see all these, I mean, the anti-corruption cases.
But the culture is changing. Culture is changing. If the culture changes alone, that's a great achievement, right? We have problems with financial problems, but culture is changing. Especially bribery and corruption culture has changed. The government servants, I'm confident that their culture will also change, and efficient working. At the moment, they don't do any work. Many government servants, so they should. A lot of people have been employed without any work for them. So
no proper job descriptions.
Yeah. So if everybody does his work, then I think that culture, if we change, and it is this government can change it, because one of the problems that people had, government servants had, is if these people are robbing, why not us? If these people are not doing their work properly, why should we follow the rules? So I mean, so that's just, now they can't say that.
Well, idle minds are the devil's workshop as well. And if you have, 40 people in an office where 10 people would suffice, and there's 30 people who are actually twiddling their thumbs, and
if you want to get anything done, you have to go to the one person who actually works.
That's usually the peon who has the office seal. But that will cost you. So hopefully not anymore. Right. So now we have the local government elections coming up. And I don't know how involved you are in this. Of course, you were involved in the presidential and the general election, although you repeatedly told me on our programs that this is for younger people to run.
We are supporting people now. I will be in Kandy, and we are working in the estate areas. We hope that we did not get enough votes from the estate areas. In the president election, very little. We hope that through the Hatton declaration, we would be able to arouse some interest, but we were unable to do it. In the second election also, we still there is this feeling that in the end they were not prepared to come with us still. But I think because unlike the north and east, we did not get as much people shifting to the NPP in the general election. But this time I think they will do, because now people know that at least something is happening, and that their problems are to some extent being looked at.
Right. And of course, as with the rest of the country, we have not had local government authorities for so long. So it's been very difficult to get anything done for a citizen or for government to get anything done on the ground in any area. What is your feeling that now with the local councils coming back online, with councillors who would be expected to do their jobs, will we see a surge of activity in local areas?
Of course, there should be a surge, and we hope that we can win. We have to win, of course. The problem is that there's a new system, so we are not sure how it works finally, because the
new system of voting, the wards and
the list, and when if you get too many seats in the wards, then they reduce the number in the list. So ultimately, if we get a majority, which I'm confident of, we will get the leading number of seats. Hopefully we can capture power, because there's a possibility the other side will get together and try to capture power, because it's not like a parliamentary election. So let's hope, and if we are, as I think, able to capture most of the provincial council, we can do a good job.
Excellent. And I'm afraid we are almost out of time. It's been delightful having you back on our program, Professor. Any final thoughts?
First, thank you for allowing me to come here. And I, like you, I hope that we will be able to get something out of this government in order to implement the Hatton Declaration. Not like thought. I am also confident that we will be able to do it.
Professor Vijaya Kumar, President of the Lanka Estate Workers Union and a member of the Executive Committee of the NPP. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away, because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.